The Courageous was a ship that no one remembered, or at least, no one cared to remember. Once a proud vessel of the Federation, it now sat alone in a forgotten corner of a quiet space station. Its hull was worn and scratched, with the marks of old battles that seemed long gone. The ship's engines hummed with a tired, almost mournful sound, but it still functioned, just barely. Captain Thorne stood on the observation deck, staring out at the ship. The Courageous was far from impressive by today's standards. Newer, faster ships had taken the Federation's place. The Courageous had been retired years ago, a relic of a past era, gathering dust. Yet Thorne had always believed there was something special about it. Maybe it was the legacy of its crew, maybe the feeling that, beneath all the rust and age, it still had a purpose. Thorne sighed and looked at the ragtag crew that had been assigned to the ship, men and women who had nowhere else to go. The Courageous wasn't a ship for experienced officers or skilled engineers. It was a ship for the forgotten, the outcasts and the misfits. But even with all that, there was a sense of loyalty among them. They had nothing else but each other, and they were all bound by the belief that the Courageous still had a role to play in the galaxy. The Federation was at war. The alien empire had begun pushing into Federation territory with terrifying speed, crushing planets one by one. But no one had expected the Courageous to be part of the fight. The Federation had moved its best ships to the front lines, leaving ships like the Courageous to rot away in the shadows. It wasn't that the Courageous was weak, it was just old, outdated. The powerful fleets of the Federation were meant to deal with threats, not this ancient warship. As Captain Thorne walked through the narrow, dimly lit halls of the Courageous, he could hear the faint murmurs of the crew, preparing for another mission that no one expected to matter. There was no grandeur here, no pomp and circumstance, just a few weary men and women, doing their jobs, keeping the ship running as best as they could. But Thorne knew that something was different. He couldn't shake the feeling that the Courageous still had a power that no one understood, not even the Federation. It wasn't just the ship that had been overlooked. It was the heart of the crew. They weren't just a collection of outcasts. They were a force of their own, determined and ready to prove their worth. And so, as the Courageous slowly drifted out of his quiet corner of the station, Captain Thorne set his eyes on the distant stars. He knew that the Federation was losing the war, and they were all about to find out just how wrong they were to overlook the old warship. The Federation's space fleet was stretched thin. The alien empire had made its move, striking swiftly and with terrifying power. Every star system they invaded fell, one after the other, like dominoes. Their ships were massive, their technology far beyond anything the Federation had. The Courageous might have been powerful in its prime, but that was a long time ago. Now it was just another forgotten relic. But that didn't stop Captain Thorne from believing in it. The war was changing. The Federation's best ships were engaged in fierce battles at the heart of the conflict, and they couldn't afford to spare any more. With each passing day, the alien empire pushed further into Federation space, taking system after system. In desperation, the Federation sent out calls for reinforcements, but there were no reinforcements to give. No new ships were on the way. No new fleets were coming to help. And that's when they made a decision no one saw coming. The Courageous was activated. "Captain, the Federation has sent us a mission," Lieutenant Ilara said as she stepped into the bridge. Her face was serious, but there was a spark in her eyes, a small glimmer of hope. The Federation's leadership, in a last-ditch effort, had decided that the Courageous might still have a part to play. It was the only ship available for a small, but critical, mission. The message was brief: defend System Alpha 9. The Federation cannot afford to lose it. System Alpha 9? Thorne asked, raising an eyebrow. That's a backwater system. It's not even on most maps. Ilara nodded. It doesn't make sense. But the order's clear. We're to head there immediately, and we're alone. Thorne stood up from his chair, staring at the star chart on the main screen. Alpha 9 was nothing more than a small cluster of mining colonies and a few forgotten research stations. The Federation had written it off years ago. Why would the alien fleet target such a remote system? It didn't add up. But orders were orders, and they didn't have the luxury of second-guessing. "We've got no other choice," Thorne muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "We'll do what we can." The crew moved quickly, preparing the ship for its journey. They had no idea what they were walking into. The Federation didn't even expect the courageous to make it there in time, let alone hold off an entire invasion. Still, the crew worked with a quiet determination. The ship was slow, old, and out of date, but it was theirs. As the courageous began its long journey to Alpha 9, Thorne couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. This wasn't just another forgotten mission. He could feel it in his gut. The Empire was coming, and they were coming for more than just Alpha 9. By the time they reached the edge of the system, the courageous was already behind enemy lines. The alien fleet was closer than anyone had anticipated, and they weren't just a handful of ships. It was an entire armada, stretching across the void like a dark cloud. The courageous had been forgotten, but the galaxy would soon learn the truth. The time of underestimating humanity was over. The courageous was about to make its stand. The courageous glided through the dark void of space, the distant stars twinkling like forgotten beacons. The crew worked tirelessly, their movements quick and precise. The ship was not built for speed, but it was steady, and that steadiness brought a sense of calm in the face of an unknown threat. Captain Thorne stood at the bridge, his eyes fixed on the redouts. They were getting closer to System Alpha 9, but the closer they got, the more uneasy he felt. There was something about this mission that didn't sit right with him. A backwater system. The Empire wasn't known for wasting time on insignificant places like this. Yet here they were, about to defend a system no one had cared about for years. His thoughts were interrupted by Lieutenant Ulara's voice. "Captain, we've got something on the radar. It's moving fast." Thorne's heart skipped a beat. They weren't alone anymore. The alien fleet had found them. The sensors pinged as a large ship appeared on the display, a scouting vessel, far too advanced for anything the courageous had in its arsenal. It was sleek, dark, and menacing. The alien ships always had an air of superiority about them, and this one was no different. Thorne could see the faint outline of more ships beyond it, hiding in the depths of space, preparing for a full assault. "Prepare for battle," Thorne ordered, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the situation. "Get us in position. We're not running this time." The crew scrambled into action. Ilara and the tactical officers coordinated their fire systems, while the engineering team worked to keep the ship's old systems from faltering under the pressure. The alien scout ship grew larger on the screen, its weapons ready to fire. Thorne knew that if they didn't strike first, they would be overwhelmed in seconds. But there was one advantage the courageous had: its age. The alien ships were designed to be fast and precise, but they relied heavily on their advanced technology. The courageous, with its outdated systems, was not as predictable. Thorne smirked. "Let's give them a surprise." The crew braced themselves as the courageous moved into position. The ship's old targeting system flared to life, sending out pulses to locate weak points in the enemy ship's defenses. Thorne had studied the courageous's design intimately, and he knew it better than anyone. He knew that it could hit harder than anyone expected if they just hit the right targets. With a commanding gesture, Thorne ordered the first strike. The courageous fired its weapons, and for the first time in years, its guns roared to life. The alien scout ship took a direct hit. Sparks flew from its hull, and the massive ship began to break apart, pieces of it floating off into space. Thorne felt a rush of triumph. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The courageous had just destroyed one of the Empire's ships. The crew, once doubted, now felt the surge of adrenaline that came with success. "That's just the beginning," Thorne said, his voice calm but filled with determination. But as the debris of the alien ship floated in the silence of space, Thorne knew this was only the start. The Empire had far more ships, far more firepower. And they were coming. The Courageous drifted in the cold silence of space, a small speck compared to the vastness of the enemy fleet that stretched across the stars. After the victory against the scout ship, the crew had a glimmer of hope. But that hope was quickly replaced with the reality of their situation. Outnumbered, outgunned, and far from reinforcements. Captain Thorne stood in the center of the bridge, eyes scanning the redouts as the alien Armada loomed ahead. The Courageous had only one shot at survival. There would be no retreat, no second chances. They had to make this count. We can't fight them head-on. Thorne muttered to himself, pacing back and forth. Not with what we have. Lieutenant Ilara, standing nearby, nodded. We'll need a strategy, something they don't expect. The Courageous was old, its systems slow and often unreliable. But there was one thing the ship still had in abundance, its crew's resourcefulness. For all the tech upgrades and advanced systems the alien fleet boasted, they lacked the one thing the crew of the Courageous had: experience. They had fought in wars and faced impossible odds before. And now, they would do it again. We need to use the ship's quirks to our advantage, Thorne said. He turned to Ilara. We're going to bait them. A puzzled look crossed Ilara's face. Bait them? How? We'll play to their arrogance. We let them think they're winning. And we lure them into a trap. Thorne began outlining his plan. The Courageous would deliberately take hits, draw the alien ships in close, and make them think they had the upper hand. The crew would use the ship's old weapons and slow-moving capabilities to target the enemy's blind spots, hoping to catch them off guard. But there was one major risk. The Courageous was vulnerable. Every hit they took would bring them closer to losing the ship. If they made one mistake, it would all be over. The crew's reactions were mixed. Some were worried, others hesitant. It wasn't a safe plan, but it was their only shot. Thorne saw the fear in their eyes, but also the resolve. They were all in this together, and they were willing to fight, no matter the odds. All right, listen up. Thorne's voice rang through the bridge, cutting through the tension. This is our plan. We take a hit, draw them in close, then hit them where they least expect it. We have to outthink them, not outgun them. Ilara stepped forward, her hands already moving to the tactical console. We'll need to reprogram the old targeting systems. They'll have to be fast and precise. Acknowledged, the tech officer replied, already working on the reprogramming. As the crew moved into position, preparing for the high-risk strategy, Thorne stood at the front of the bridge, his heart pounding. The fate of the Courageous, and possibly the Federation, rested on this one chance. The ship groaned as its old systems began to work overtime, sending the ship into position. Here we go, Thorne said, staring ahead at the incoming alien ships. We either make it through this, or we don't. The plan was set. The crew of the Courageous would have to rely on everything they had learned, trusting in their instincts and the old warship's legacy. As the first alien ships began their descent toward the Courageous, the crew braced themselves. The trap was set. Now all they had to do was wait. The Courageous was now in the heart of enemy territory. The alien Armada loomed large, its sleek ships cutting through the void like predators circling their prey. Captain Thorne could feel the tension building on the bridge. The crew had followed his risky plan, drawing the enemy ships into range. But now the real test had begun. The trap was set, but it had to work. If it didn't, they were finished. Ready, Captain. Lieutenant Ilara's voice broke through the silence. Her hands moved rapidly over the console, the ship's weapons primed and locked. Thorne nodded, his eyes focused on the approaching fleet. The plan had worked so far, but it wasn't over yet. The alien ships were now closing in, thinking they had the upper hand. They believed the Courageous was weak, vulnerable, and easy prey. But they had underestimated one thing: the crew aboard her. The Courageous wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of defiance, and Captain Thorne wasn't about to let it fall. Now, he said quietly, the word of command. Activate the traps. The Courageous lurched as the old weapon systems fired. The ship took a few hits from the enemy ships, but it held its ground, just as planned. The alien fleet closed in even further, thinking they had overwhelmed the Courageous. What they didn't see was the hidden danger waiting for them. Suddenly, a series of explosions erupted from beneath the Courageous, damaging one of the alien ships in the rear of the formation. The Courageous had taken the hits, but it had also released its hidden payload, sending deadly shrapnel and debris toward the nearest alien vessel. The explosion sent the enemy ship spiraling out of control, and it crashed into another, causing a chain reaction. "Direct hit," shouted one of the crew members, his voice filled with disbelief. "We got them." The Courageous didn't stop there. The crew quickly followed through with the next phase of the plan. The ship's old, slow engines made it easy for the alien ships to target, but that same predictability was their advantage. They had drawn the enemy in close, where the Courageous's unpredictable old systems could cause chaos. More explosions rang out as the crew used the Courageous's outdated weapons in tandem with its ancient tactics. The alien ships, expecting clean, precise battles, were caught in a web of confusion and unpredictable strikes. "We're not done yet," Thorn shouted, rallying his crew. "Keep it up. We're breaking their lines." The battle raged on. Despite the odds, despite the outdated technology, and the overwhelming numbers, the Courageous was doing the impossible. The crew was proving that, with enough heart and ingenuity, even a forgotten warship could turn the tide. The alien ships began to falter, their formation breaking as they tried to regroup. But it wasn't just the weapons that were breaking the alien forces, it was the spirit of the crew. They fought with everything they had, driven by the belief that they weren't just defending a small system, they were defending everything they stood for. This battle wasn't just about the Courageous, it was about the Federation, about humanity's resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. Captain Thorn's heart raced as the Courageous took another direct hit. The ship groaned, but it didn't stop. The Courageous was far from perfect, but it was still standing, and as the alien fleet began to retreat, Thorn knew they had done it. They had turned the tide, against all odds. "We've done it," Ilara said, a relieved smile spreading across her face. The Courageous had proved its worth. It wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a weapon of the future. The battle had shifted in their favor, but Captain Thorn knew that this was only the beginning. The alien fleet, although disorganized, was still powerful and relentless. The Courageous had managed to strike down a few of their ships, but there were hundreds more. Each one seemed more advanced than the last, but the Federation's crew, though exhausted, was starting to feel something they hadn't felt in years: hope. "We've hit them hard, but they're regrouping," Lieutenant Ilara said, her voice tight with focus. "We need to finish this before they can call for reinforcements." Thorn glanced at the tactical display. The alien ships were forming a new, stronger line. It seemed like the more the Courageous hurt them, the more determined they became. But there was something in the enemy's movements, something he could use. "We don't have much time," Thorn muttered. He turned toward Ilara and the rest of the crew. "Prepare the Courageous for a full assault. We're going straight for the heart of their fleet." It was a risky decision. The Courageous was already battered, its systems groaning under the strain. Its shields were down, and the old engines were struggling to keep up with the demands of the battle. But if they didn't act fast, the enemy would find a way to overwhelm them. The Federation couldn't afford to let that happen. The crew moved quickly. The ship's weapon systems were recharged, and the engineers worked to keep the engines from failing completely. They all knew what was at stake. It wasn't just a battle for Alpha 9 anymore. It was a battle for the survival of the Federation. Thorn watched as the Courageous slowly turned, heading straight toward the thickest part of the enemy formation. It felt almost like a suicide mission, but there was no turning back now. The alien fleet was positioned perfectly for a final strike. If they could push through their defenses, the Courageous could deal the final blow. "We can do this," Thorn said aloud, more to himself than anyone else. "It's not about the ship anymore. It's about us." Ilara gave him a brief nod, her expression serious but filled with determination. "We're with you, Captain." The Courageous lurched forward, its engines straining as it made its way toward the alien fleet. The crew had learned to trust each other, to use the ship's old systems in ways no one thought possible. The ship's outdated weapons now felt like a strength, not a weakness. Every blast from the Courageous seemed to shake the enemy, as if they couldn't believe the old ship was still standing. The first wave of alien ships came into range. The Courageous fired, unleashing everything it had. The blast struck the enemy with surprising accuracy, damaging their front lines. The alien ships were thrown into disarray. They had underestimated the old warship, and now they were paying the price. But there was more to do. As the Courageous moved deeper into the heart of the enemy formation, the crew was relentless. Every shot counted. Every move was calculated. The alien fleet began to falter, their once impressive formations now breaking apart. "We're getting through," one of the crew members shouted. The Courageous had punched a hole right through the center of the alien fleet. Thorn's eyes locked on the command ship at the heart of the enemy formation. It was massive, nearly twice the size of the largest Federation warship. If they could destroy it, the rest of the Armada would fall apart. It was a gamble, but they had no other choice. "Target the command ship," Thorn ordered. "All power to the forward cannons." The Courageous fired one last time, sending a massive blast toward the heart of the enemy fleet. The alien command ship was hit directly, and it exploded in a burst of light and fire, sending shockwaves through the remaining ships. The alien Armada began to break apart. The remaining ships, no longer coordinated, turned and fled, leaving the Courageous and its crew victorious. The bridge erupted into cheers. They had done it. Against all odds, the Courageous had broken the alien fleet. Thorn slumped back into his chair, exhausted but proud. "We've won." It wasn't over yet, but for the first time in a long while, Captain Thorn allowed himself a moment of relief. The Courageous had proved its worth, and its crew had shown the galaxy that humanity would never be forgotten. The Courageous had made it this far, but Captain Thorn knew that the hardest part was still ahead. The alien fleet had been shattered, but their command ship was still out there, lurking in the depths of space. It was larger than any ship the Federation had, a behemoth designed to lead and protect the entire Armada. If they didn't destroy it, the fight wouldn't be over. The alien empire would regroup, and this momentary victory would mean nothing. Thorn stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes locked on the giant enemy ship on the screen. The Courageous had dealt a heavy blow to the fleet, but the command ship was still intact, and it was now their last obstacle. His crew was tired, battered, but they weren't ready to give up. "Full speed ahead," Thorn ordered, his voice steady. "We're going in." The crew immediately moved into action. Ilara adjusted the ship's trajectory, steering them toward the massive alien vessel. The Courageous groaned under the strain, its old systems protesting, but the ship held together. There was no turning back now. The crew had come this far, and they wouldn't stop until the battle was won. "Captain, we're closing in on the command ship," Ilara reported, her fingers flying over the console. "Their weapons are charging. They know we're coming." Thorn clenched his fists, but his face remained calm. "We've taken their best shots. Now it's time to finish this." The alien command ship was slowly turning, ready to unleash its full arsenal. Its massive cannons glowed, aimed directly at the Courageous. But Thorn knew something the alien commanders didn't. The Courageous might be old, but it had one advantage: its unpredictability. The alien fleet relied on precision and speed, but the Courageous was a moving target that could outsmart them if they played their cards right. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Thorn shouted. "Keep them guessing." The Courageous swerved to the left, narrowly dodging the first volley of energy blasts from the command ship. The ship's old systems struggled, but the crew's quick thinking kept them one step ahead. The Courageous wasn't built for speed, but it could take hits and keep going, unlike the sleek alien vessels. "We're almost in range," Ilara said, her voice filled with anticipation. Thorn looked at the crew. They were all exhausted, but there was no hesitation in their eyes. They had come this far, and they were ready to finish it. The battle was personal now. This wasn't just about winning. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the most powerful forces in the universe. "Fire," Thorn commanded. The Courageous unleashed a barrage of blasts from its forward cannons, hitting the alien command ship with shocking accuracy. The massive ship shuddered, and the shields flickered. The crew cheered, but Thorn knew they had to keep pressing. This was the moment of truth. The alien command ship fired back, its weapons tearing through the Courageous's already weakened shields. The ship rocked violently, and alarms blared across the bridge. Thorn held onto the console, his heart racing. They couldn't take many more hits like that. "Target their engines," Thorn ordered. "We have to cripple them." The Courageous turned sharply, aiming at the rear of the alien ship. The crew worked together, firing once more. This time, they hit their target. The alien command ship's engines sparked, then exploded, sending debris flying in every direction. It was a direct hit. The alien ship groaned, its forward momentum slowing. It wasn't done yet, but it was badly damaged. "Finish it," Thorn said, his voice firm. "All power to forward cannons." One last blast erupted from the Courageous, hitting the alien command ship with devastating force. The ship's shields collapsed, and the massive vessel finally went silent, its once proud form now reduced to a wreck. The Courageous had done it. The alien fleet, once a powerful force, was now shattered. The crew had defied the odds, and the victory was theirs. The bridge erupted into cheers, but Captain Thorn remained still, staring at the wreckage of the alien command ship. They had won, but at a cost. The Courageous had taken a beating, and many of the crew were wounded, but they had done the impossible. "We did it," Ilara said, her voice shaking with relief. Thorn allowed himself a small smile. "Yes, we did." The Courageous had proven its worth. It had stood strong against an enemy that seemed unbeatable, and it had come out victorious. The Federation had been saved, not by the newest, most advanced warship, but by an old ship that had been forgotten and overlooked. And now, the galaxy would never forget the name of the Courageous. The battle was over. The silence that followed the destruction of the alien command ship was almost too much to bear. For a few moments, the crew of the Courageous stood still, their eyes fixed on the fading debris of the alien fleet. It had been a hard-fought battle, and the cost had been high, but they had done the impossible. Captain Thorn slumped back in his chair, his body aching from the tension of the battle. His mind raced as he processed what had just happened. The Courageous had faced an entire armada and emerged victorious. But at what price? The ship had taken heavy damage, and many of his crew were injured. The ship groaned under the strain, its systems flickering as if begging for rest. But despite the cost, there was no denying the truth. The Courageous had saved the Federation. "Captain, we've received a transmission," Ilara said, her voice still trembling with excitement. She quickly adjusted the comm system, and a familiar voice filled the room. "Captain Thorn, this is Admiral Miller. I'm speaking on behalf of the Federation High Command. Congratulations, you've done the impossible. You've broken the alien armada." The crew exchanged looks of disbelief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had won. Thorn took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Thank you, Admiral. But it's not over yet. We've sustained heavy damage. We need repairs, and we need them fast. We're sending reinforcements to your location immediately. Your bravery and resourcefulness have earned the Federation's highest commendation. Hold tight, Captain. Help is on the way." Thorn nodded, grateful but wary. They had won the battle. But the war was far from over. The alien empire would not be defeated by just one battle, no matter how important this victory was. The courageous had struck a blow, but it was only the first step in a much larger war. As the transmission ended, Thorn stood and turned to his crew. They were all exhausted, their faces lined with fatigue and pain, but there was a shared sense of pride among them. They had fought together, against impossible odds, and they had come out on top. It wasn't just the ship they had saved, it was the future of the Federation. "We did it," Lieutenant Ilara whispered, as if she couldn't quite believe the words. Thorn smiled, though it was tired and strained. "We did. But this victory doesn't belong to the courageous alone. It belongs to all of you. We've proven that even the oldest ship, the one that was forgotten, can still make a difference. You all believed in this ship, in me, and in each other. And that's why we won." There was a long moment of silence as the crew took in his words. They had always known that the Courageous was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's resilience, a testament to the spirit of those who fought, no matter how impossible the odds. Now, that belief had been proven. "Captain," one of the crew members called out, "the Federation is sending us new orders." Thorn turned to the screen, where a new message blinked on the console. He read the transmission carefully, his face growing serious once more. "It's not over," Thorn said quietly. "The alien empire is regrouping. We've broken their Armada, but they'll be back. And when they do, we'll be ready." The crew nodded, their faces hardening with resolve. The victory was important, but the war was far from over. The Courageous had shown them what they were capable of. They had fought against the impossible, and they had won. As the Courageous drifted toward the Federation's fleet for repairs, Captain Thorn knew that this battle would go down in history. The Courageous might have been overlooked, but no one would ever forget the ship that turned the tide in the war. The Courageous drifted through space, now escorted by Federation reinforcements. The battle had been won, but the ship's battered hull and the weary crew were a constant reminder of the price they had paid. It was strange, Thorn thought, how a single battle could change everything. Only days ago, they had been a forgotten crew, aboard a forgotten ship. Now, they were heroes, the ones who had saved the Federation from certain defeat. Thorn walked across the bridge, his gaze resting on the view screen where the distant shape of a Federation battleship slowly grew larger. The crew was exhausted, but there was a quiet pride in their eyes. They had survived the impossible, and now they were about to face the next chapter in the war. "Captain," Ilara called from the tactical console. "We've received a message from Admiral Miller. He wants to speak with you." Thorn nodded. "Put him through." The face of Admiral Miller appeared on the screen, his expression grim but filled with respect. "Captain Thorn, I can't tell you enough how proud the Federation is of you and your crew. You've not only broken the enemy's Armada, but you've also proven that even the most outdated ship can still be a force to be reckoned with." Thorn stood at attention, though he felt a deep weariness creeping in. "We did what we had to do, Admiral, but the victory is just the beginning. The enemy will come back." Miller nodded, his eyes serious. "We know, but now, thanks to you, we have a foothold. We've learned something important from the Courageous' success. We've underestimated the strength of humanity's spirit for too long. The Federation's best fleets are on their way to reinforce us. We'll rebuild, but we need you, Captain. Your ship and your crew will be at the forefront of the next phase of the war." Thorn looked at the faces of his crew, some bandaged and bruised, others sitting in quiet reflection. "We'll be ready, Admiral." With that, the transmission ended, and a long silence filled the bridge. The crew had saved the Federation, but now the real work began. The alien empire wasn't finished, and neither was the Courageous' mission. The ship had been given new life, and its crew was ready to continue the fight. As the Courageous approached the Federation's flagship, the crew knew they would be welcomed as heroes, but they also understood that the war was far from over. There would be new battles, new challenges, and even greater threats ahead. But they had proven that humanity was capable of anything, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Thorn watched as the repair crews began to assess the damage to the Courageous. The ship had held up, but it was clear that they wouldn't be able to keep fighting forever without repairs. Still, there was a sense of unity among the crew, something that hadn't been there when they were just a forgotten ship. "We're going to need a new plan," Thorn said, turning to his first officer. "But we'll figure it out, together." Ilara smiled, a rare moment of light breaking through the tension. "Together, Captain." The Courageous had proven that a ship wasn't just about its technology, it was about its crew. And as long as they fought as one, they could face whatever came next. The war wasn't over, but with the Courageous leading the way, humanity had a fighting chance. The Courageous floated in the vast expanse of space, its battered hull a testament to the fierce battle it had endured. The crew, though exhausted, stood proud. They had broken the alien Armada, saved a critical Federation system, and proved to the galaxy that even the oldest ship could turn the tide of a war. But Thorn knew it wasn't over. The Federation had only bought some time, not an end to the conflict. The alien empire would return, stronger and angrier. Captain Thorn paced the bridge, his mind racing with plans. The Courageous had earned its place in history, but it had also earned its scars. It couldn't keep going forever. But as long as the crew was willing, as long as they believed in the ship, Thorn wasn't ready to give up. "Captain, we've received orders," Ilara said, breaking his thoughts. "Admiral Miller wants to meet with you again. He says it's urgent." Thorn nodded, his thoughts still on the upcoming battles. "Put him through." The screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Miller's stern face. His tone was serious, but with a trace of something else: respect. "Captain Thorn, we've been tracking the movements of the alien forces. It's not just a single armada this time. They're assembling a new fleet, larger and more advanced than before. They're coming for Earth. And when they arrive, we'll need the Courageous and your crew to be at the front lines." Thorn's grip tightened on the console. Earth, the home of humanity. They couldn't let it fall. "We'll be ready, Admiral, whatever it takes." Miller's expression softened. "I know you will, Captain. The Federation has faith in you. But this time, it's different. You won't be alone. We're sending reinforcements, but we need you to lead the charge. The Courageous is the symbol of our resistance now, and we can't afford to lose that symbol." Thorn looked out at the crew on the bridge, their faces lined with fatigue, but filled with the same determination that had carried them through the toughest of battles. They were ready. "We'll fight, Admiral. We'll give everything we've got." As the transmission ended, Thorn turned to his crew. They had been through so much already, and yet here they were, ready for the next battle. "All right, everyone. It's not going to be easy, but we've faced worse. We'd fought through impossible odds. And this time, we'll do it again." Ilara gave him a nod, her eyes shining with the same determination. "We've been through the fire together. We can handle anything they throw at us." Thorn smiled, though it was a tired smile. "We've shown the galaxy that humanity will never back down. Now it's time to show them what we can really do." The Courageous set its course, ready to face the biggest battle of their lives. As they traveled toward Earth, the crew prepared for the fight ahead. The Federation had been saved, but the war was far from over. The alien empire had underestimated humanity before, but this time there would be no underestimation. The Courageous was ready, and with it, a crew that had fought through impossible odds to prove that no matter how old, no matter how forgotten, humanity would always stand tall. The galaxy would learn that Courageous was not just a ship. It was a symbol that even when the darkness seemed overwhelming, humanity would rise. Together,